At 11:23 a.m. on September 17, 1944, Private First Class Eddie Kowalski crouched inside his Sherman tank outside the French village of Arracourt. A Panzer IV had just appeared 400 yards away, turret turning toward them. Kowalski's gunner was dead, his commander was wounded, and Kowalski was a loader, not a gunner. He'd never fired the 75mm gun in combat, never aimed it, never even trained on it. The Panzer fired first. The shell screamed past, so close the Sherman rocked sideways. Kowalski tasted copper in his mouth. His ears rang. The turret stank of cordite and blood. His commander, Lieutenant Carson, slumped against the radio, pressing a field dressing to his shoulder. Carson looked at Kowalski and said one word: "Shoot." Kowalski climbed into the gunner's seat. His hands shook. The periscope showed the Panzer reloading, maybe 20 seconds away from firing again. Standard doctrine said aim for the lower hull, hit the tracks, immobilize it. But Kowalski couldn't see the lower hull. Trees blocked his view. He could only see the turret, and he had no idea where to aim. The Sherman's gun sight was calibrated for ranges between 600 and 2,000 yards, but the Panzer was only 400 yards away. Too close. The sight didn't go that low. Kowalski would have to guess. Aim by feel. Aim blind. His foot touched something on the turret floor. A broken hand mirror, 5 inches across, cracked down the middle. It had belonged to their gunner, Corporal Hayes. Hayes used it to check his teeth after eating, used it to shave, used it for nothing tactical, nothing useful. Just a stupid mirror. Kowalski picked it up. The Panzer's gun barrel was leveling, maybe 10 seconds now. Kowalski's vision narrowed. His breath came fast and shallow. He held the mirror above the periscope at an angle and looked down through the gun sight. The mirror reflected the view outside, but lower, much lower. He could see the Panzer's hull now, could see the driver's viewport, could see the weak point where the armor was only 50mm thick. He adjusted the mirror, lined up the crosshairs. The Panzer fired. The shell punched through the Sherman's front glasses plate and exited through the engine deck without detonating. Pure luck. 3 inches higher and Kowalski would have died. But the Sherman was still running, still fighting. Kowalski pressed the firing button. The 75 roared. The turret filled with smoke. The Sherman lurched backward from the recoil. When the smoke cleared, the Panzer sat motionless, black smoke pouring from its driver's hatch. 1 shot, 1 kill. With a broken hand mirror. Lieutenant Carson stared at Kowalski. Blood soaked through his dressing. He said, "What the hell did you just do?" Kowalski didn't answer, because 2 more Panzers had just appeared on the ridgeline, and they were closer than the first one. 300 yards, maybe less. Both turrets turning toward the Sherman. Both guns loaded and ready. Kowalski still had the mirror in his hand. What happened next wasn't in any training manual. The Battle of Arracourt began 3 days earlier, on September 14, 1944. General Patton's Third Army had just crossed into France. They were pushing east toward the German border. Fast. Too fast, some said. Supply lines stretched thin. Fuel ran low. But Patton didn't care about logistics. He cared about momentum. The Germans cared about stopping him. 5th Panzer Army assembled near Arracourt. Over 200 tanks. Panthers, Panzer IVs, Tigers. The best armor Germany still had in the West. Their mission was simple. Destroy the American spearhead. Cut off Patton's advance. Push the Americans back across the Moselle River. The Americans had the 4th Armored Division. Shermans mostly. The M4A1 model with the 75mm gun. Good tanks for infantry support. Reliable. Easy to maintain. But not built for tank versus tank combat. Not against Panthers. The Panther weighed 45 tons. The Sherman weighed 33. The Panther's frontal armor was 80mm thick, sloped at 55 degrees. The Sherman's was only 51mm. A Panther could kill a Sherman at 2,000 yards. A Sherman needed to get within 500 yards to even dent a Panther's front plate. The math was brutal. In Normandy, American tank crews learned this the hard way. 5 Shermans lost for every Panther destroyed. sometimes worse. The Sherman earned a nickname among German tankers, Tommy Cooker, because they burned so easily, because crews rarely escaped when the ammunition detonated. American crews had their own nickname for it, Ronson, after the cigarette lighter. Lights first time, every time. Eddie Kowalski knew the statistics. Every loader knew them. 4th Armored had already lost 47 Shermans since crossing the Moselle. Kowalski's tank, call sign Bad News, had survived 6 engagements. Pure luck, mostly. They'd hit Panthers from the side, from the rear, never head-on, never at 400 yards with a loader doing the shooting. Until today. The problem wasn't just armor. It was visibility. The Sherman's gun sight worked perfectly at normal combat ranges, 600 to 1500 yards. But at close range, under 400 yards, the sight couldn't depress low enough to aim at the enemy hull. You could only see the upper turret, and shooting a Panther's turret from the front was suicide. The armor was too thick, 110 millimeters. The shell would just bounce. Tankers called it the dead zone. Too close to aim properly, too far to ram. If you found yourself in the dead zone against a Panther, doctrine said, reverse. Get distance, get a better angle, get help. But Kowalski couldn't reverse. 2 more Panzers sat on the ridge, 300 yards out. If he backed up, he'd expose the Sherman's thinner side armor. If he stayed still, the Panzers would bracket him. 1 shot from the left, 1 from the right, no escape. Lieutenant Carson's radio crackled, battalion headquarters asking for a status report. Carson didn't answer. He was too busy watching Kowalski hold a broken mirror above the gun sight like some kind of magic trick. The lead Panzer fired. The shell hit 20 yards short, kicking up dirt and smoke. Ranging shot. The next one would connect. Kowalski had maybe 8 seconds. He angled the mirror, watched the reflection, saw the Panzer's lower hull appear in his sight picture, saw the driver's viewport, a rectangle of steel 12 inches wide. Hit that and the 75 would punch straight through into the crew compartment. He fired. The Panzer erupted. Not just smoke this time, fire. The whole front end peeled open like a crushed can. The driver's hatch blew off. Flames shot 30 feet high. Kowalski had hit the ammunition storage. The tank burned so hot the paint on the turret bubbled and blackened. 2 kills. 2 minutes. The 3rd Panzer turned to retreat. Kowalski didn't let it. He tracked it through the mirror, adjusting the angle as the Panzer moved. 400 yards. 420. 450. The Panzer was trying to get out of the dead zone, get to a range where its own sights would work properly. Kowalski fired again. The shell caught the Panzer in the engine deck. The tank shuddered, rolled forward another 10 yards, and stopped. Black smoke poured from the grills. The crew bailed out, running for the tree line. Kowalski watched them go. He didn't fire again. They were no longer a threat. 3 Panzers. 4 minutes. With a broken hand mirror. Carson grabbed the radio. His voice shook. Battalion, this is bad news. 3 enemy tanks destroyed, all 3 confirmed kills. The radio went silent for a moment. Then, say again bad news? Did you say 3? Affirmative. 3 Panzer IVs. 4 minutes. Another pause. Bad news. What's your crew status? Carson looked at Kowalski. Looked at the mirror still in his hand. Looked at the burning wrecks on the ridge. He said, Battalion, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. But word spread fast. By that afternoon, every tank commander in 4th Armored Division wanted to know what happened at Arracourt. How a loader with no gunnery training had knocked out 3 German tanks in 4 minutes. How he'd done it at close range, in the dead zone, with a sight that wasn't designed for it. And how he'd done it with a 5-inch hand mirror. What they didn't know yet was how bad the problem really was. The dead zone wasn't new. American tankers had been complaining about it since Normandy. Every tank commander knew the problem. At ranges under 400 yards, the M4 Sherman's gun sight couldn't depress far enough to see the lower hull of enemy tanks. You could see turrets, you could see the sky, but you couldn't see the vulnerable spots. the driver's viewport, the lower glacis plate, the spots where armor was thin enough to penetrate. The M4's periscope sat high in the turret, the gun barrel sat low. At long range, this didn't matter, the angle worked out. But at close range, the geometry failed. You were essentially shooting blind, guessing where the hull was, hoping you got lucky. Most crews didn't get lucky. In July 1944, a Sherman platoon from the 2nd Armored Division encountered 3 Panthers near Saint-Lô. Range, 300 yards. The Shermans never got a shot off. All 5 tanks destroyed in 90 seconds. The Panthers fired from hull-down positions, only their turrets visible. The Sherman gunners aimed where they thought the hulls were. Every shot bounced or missed entirely. In August, near Mortain, another engagement. 4 Shermans versus 2 Panzer IVs. Range, 250 yards. The Shermans closed fast, trying to get side shots. 1 Sherman made it. The other 3 burned. The problem was simple. By the time you got close enough to flank, you'd already entered the dead zone. And in the dead zone, the Panzer could see you perfectly. You couldn't see it. Ordnance Department knew about the problem. Field reports flooded in throughout summer 1944. Tank commanders requested new sights, adjustable periscopes, anything that would let them aim properly at close range. The response was always the same. Under review. Being evaluated. Future modification pending. Translation, not happening anytime soon. So crews improvised. Some tankers tried stacking ammunition boxes behind the gunner seat, raising themselves higher to see over the sight. It didn't work. The angle was wrong. Others tried marking their periscopes with grease pencil, estimating where to aim based on past engagements. This worked slightly better. But only if the terrain was flat. Only if the enemy tank was the same model as before. Only if you had time to calculate. In combat, you never had time. Staff Sergeant Mike DiMaggio, a gunner from 3rd Armored Division, tried something different. He brought a dentist's mirror into his Sherman. Small, circular, mounted on a swivel handle. He held it at different angles while his loader called out what he saw through the periscope. The idea was to find a position where the mirror reflected the lower battlefield. It almost worked, but the mirror was too small. The field of view was maybe 20 degrees, not enough to track a moving target. DiMaggio's tank got hit 2 days later. He survived, barely. Burns on his hands and face. He spent 3 weeks in a field hospital. When he came back, he didn't bring the mirror. The 4th Armored Division tried a different approach. They requested expedited delivery of the new M4A3 model, which had a lower-mounted periscope, better angles, better visibility at close range. Division headquarters submitted the request in August. The answer came back in September. Current production allocated to priority theaters. Estimated delivery, December 1944. 4 months away. The battle at Arracourt was happening now. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, commanding officer of the 37th Tank Battalion, held a meeting on September 16th. Every tank commander attended. Abrams laid out the situation. 5th Panzer Army was pushing hard. Engagement ranges were getting shorter, 200 yards, sometimes less. Fighting in villages, in forests, in terrain where long-range gunnery didn't matter. Abrams said, "We need to figure this out, now. Because if we don't, we're going to lose half our tanks before we reach the German border." One commander suggested backing up whenever possible. Maintain distance. Stay out of the dead zone. Abrams shook his head. Patton doesn't back up. Neither do we. Another commander suggested focusing on ambush tactics. Hit from the side. Avoid frontal engagements entirely. Abrams said, "That works until it doesn't. What happens when they see you first?" Nobody had an answer. That meeting ended at 4:30 p.m. 16 hours later, Eddie Kowalski would pick up a broken hand mirror and solve the problem they couldn't. But first, he had to survive the night. Because the Germans weren't done at Arracourt. Not even close. And the dead zone was about to get a lot more dangerous. Lieutenant Carson radioed battalion headquarters at 11:40 a.m. He described what happened. 3 Panzers destroyed in 4 minutes. A loader using a hand mirror to aim. The response was immediate. Hold position. Don't move. Battalion commander is coming to you. Lieutenant Colonel Abrams arrived 30 minutes later. He climbed onto Bad News and looked inside the turret. Kowalski still sat in the gunner's seat. The mirror sat on his lap. Abrams picked it up, turned it over. 5 inches across, cracked down the middle. Absolutely nothing tactical about it. Abrams said, "Show me." Kowalski positioned himself at the gun sight, held the mirror above the periscope at a 45-degree angle. The reflection showed the ground outside, maybe 300 yards out. Abrams watched. His expression didn't change. He said, "Again, slower." Kowalski demonstrated. The Sherman's periscope looked straight ahead. The gun sight looked through the periscope, but the gun barrel pointed slightly downward. At long range, this worked fine. The bullet drop and the angle lined up. At close range, the sight looked too high. You saw sky and turrets, not hulls. The mirror changed the geometry. Held at the right angle, it reflected the view downward, not from the periscope's perspective, but from a point about 8 inches higher. That 8 inches was enough. The reflection showed the lower battlefield, the hulls, the weak points. Abrams asked, "How do you know where to aim?" Kowalski said, "Same as before, the crosshairs, but I watched the reflection, not the direct view." "And the angle? How do you adjust for different ranges?" "Trial and error. 300 yards needs maybe 40 degrees. 400 needs 35. I just tilt until the hull appears in the center of the sight picture." Abrams went quiet. He looked at the 3 burning Panzers on the ridge, looked at the mirror, looked at Kowalski. He said, "How long did it take you to figure this out?" "About 5 seconds, right before the first Panzer killed us." Abrams climbed down from the tank. He gathered the other tank commanders, 12 men, all within shouting distance. He held up the mirror and said, "This loader just solved our dead zone problem. With this." One commander laughed, actually laughed. He said, "Sir, that's a shaving mirror." Abrams didn't smile. He said, "That shaving mirror killed 3 Panzers in 4 minutes, from the front, at ranges where your gun sights don't work. Now shut up and pay attention." He ordered Kowalski to demonstrate again. This time, all 12 commanders watched. Kowalski showed them the angle, the positioning, how to adjust for range, how to track moving targets through the reflection. It looked awkward. It looked improvised. It looked ridiculous. But the burning Panzers on the ridge proved it worked. One commander asked, "What about the field of view? That mirror's tiny." Kowalski said, "You don't need wide view. You need to see the hull. That's it. The mirror shows about 30 degrees, enough to track one target." Another commander asked, "What if the mirror breaks? What if it falls?" "Then you're back where you started." Blind in the dead zone. Abrams cut in. He said, "Every tank in this battalion will have a mirror by tonight. I don't care if you steal them from medics. I don't care if you break into French houses and take them off bathroom walls. Every gunner gets one. Every loader carries a backup." The commanders dispersed. Within 2 hours, 4th Armored Division had mobilized a mirror collection operation. Tankers went into Arracourt village, knocked on doors, offered cigarettes, chocolate, money for any mirror larger than 4 inches. Some villagers refused, most didn't. By dusk, 47 Shermans had mirrors mounted or taped near their gun sights. But having a mirror and knowing how to use it were different things. The angle had to be perfect. Too steep and you'd see nothing but dirt. Too shallow and you'd see sky. And you had to hold it steady while the tank moved, while shells landed nearby, while your hands shook from adrenaline. Kowalski spent the afternoon training other loaders. He showed them the grip. 2 fingers on the mirror's edge, thumb on the back. Hold it like you're looking at your teeth, but angle it down 40 degrees. Keep your other hand on the gun controls. Don't let the mirror drift. Don't overcorrect. One loader, Private Ray Hollis, asked, "What if I can't hold it steady?" Kowalski said, "Then tape it, but you'll lose the ability to adjust angles. Works for static defense, useless if you're moving. By evening, 20 loaders had practiced the technique. Some picked it up fast, others struggled. The mirror technique required coordination. You had to watch the reflection, operate the gun controls, and adjust the mirror angle simultaneously, like patting your head and rubbing your stomach while someone shot at you. But it worked. That was the only thing that mattered. It worked. At 1800 hours, German artillery opened up. Shells whistled overhead, impacting around Arracourt. The barrage lasted 30 minutes. When it stopped, the radio crackled. German armor spotted moving south. Multiple contacts. At least a dozen tanks. Range, 1,200 yards and closing. Abrams gave the order. All tanks, hold position. Let them come to us. The Germans advanced. Panthers mostly. They moved cautiously, expecting American tanks to fire at long range like always. But 4th Armored held fire. Waited. Watched the range close. 1,100 yards. 900. 700. Still waiting. At 500 yards, the Germans realized something was wrong. They stopped advancing. Started to turn, looking for cover. Too late. Abrams ordered, "Open fire!" 17 Shermans fired simultaneously. Not at the turrets, at the hulls. Because now they could see them. Through mirrors, through reflections, through a technique that didn't exist 24 hours ago. 11 Panthers destroyed in the first minute. The rest retreated. Fast. 4th Armored didn't lose a single tank. But the mirror technique had a problem nobody anticipated. A problem that almost got Kowalski killed the next morning. The problem revealed itself at dawn on September 18th. Kowalski sat in his gunner's seat, mirror positioned, ready for another engagement. A lone Panzer IV appeared at 300 yards. Perfect range for the mirror technique. Kowalski angled the mirror, watched the reflection, lined up the crosshairs on the Panzer's hull. He fired. The shell missed. Not by inches, by yards. It impacted 20 feet to the left of the Panzer, kicking up dirt and grass. The Panzer immediately fired back. The shell hit Bad News's front plate, penetrating 3 inches before the armor stopped it. The Sherman lurched. Kowalski's head slammed against the gun sight. Blood ran from his nose. He fired again. Another miss. This time to the right. The Panzer was stationary, not moving. An easy target at 300 yards. But Kowalski couldn't hit it. Lieutenant Carson yelled, "What's wrong?" Kowalski didn't know. The mirror showed the hull clearly. The crosshairs lined up. Everything looked correct, but the shots weren't connecting. He adjusted the mirror angle. Fired a third time. The shell hit 50 yards short, skipping off the ground like a stone on water. The Panzer advanced, now at 250 yards, close enough that Kowalski could see the commander's head poking out of the turret hatch, close enough to die. He fired again. This shot went high, screaming over the Panzer's turret into the trees beyond. Carson grabbed the radio. "All tanks, we've got a problem. The mirror isn't working." But it was working. For everyone else. 2 other Shermans opened fire on the same Panzer. Both hit. The Panzer shuddered, smoke pouring from its engine deck. The crew bailed out. Kowalski watched them run. He didn't understand. Those gunners used mirrors too. They hit their target. Why couldn't he? Then he looked at his mirror. Really looked at it. The crack running down the middle had widened overnight. The 2 halves sat at slightly different angles now. When light hit the mirror, it reflected 2 images, not 1. The crosshairs in his gun sight lined up with the left reflection, but the actual target sat where the right reflection showed it. The crack was splitting his aim. Kowalski grabbed a roll of adhesive tape from the ammo rack, wrapped it around the mirror's edges, pulling the 2 halves together. The crack didn't disappear, but the reflections merged. Mostly. He tested it on a tree stump 400 yards out, lined up the crosshairs, fired. The shell hit 2 feet left of the stump. Better. Not perfect, but better. The problem was physics. Mirrors don't just reflect light. They reflect it at specific angles. A flat mirror produces a single accurate reflection. A cracked mirror produces multiple reflections, each slightly offset. And when you're aiming a gun through those reflections, even a 1/4 degree offset translates to yards of error at combat ranges. But Kowalski didn't know physics. He knew tanks. He knew shooting. And he knew that if his mirror was cracked, other mirrors would crack too. Under stress, under vibration, under the constant pounding of the 75mm gun firing inches away. He radioed the other tanks. "Check your mirrors. If they're cracked, replace them now." 3 tanks reported cracks. 2 had already noticed accuracy problems. They'd thought it was user error, nerves, bad luck. It wasn't. It was broken glass creating false reflections. Lieutenant Colonel Abrams issued new orders immediately. Every mirror had to be inspected before combat. Any crack, any chip, any imperfection meant replacement. Loaders carried backup mirrors. Commanders carried spares. Some tanks mounted 2 mirrors side by side, switching between them if one failed. But mirrors were fragile. That was the fundamental problem. Glass breaks, especially in tanks, especially in combat. The Sherman's interior wasn't gentle. Every shot from the 75 created massive recoil. The whole turret shook. Spent shell casings flew everywhere, clanging off metal surfaces. If a mirror wasn't secured perfectly, it would crack within minutes. Some loaders tried steel mirrors, polished metal instead of glass. More durable, harder to break, but the reflection was dimmer, fuzzier. You could see the enemy hull, but not clearly enough to identify weak points, not clearly enough to aim with confidence. Others tried acrylic mirrors, lightweight plastic, nearly unbreakable, but acrylic scratched easily. Gunsmoke left residue that couldn't be wiped away without damaging the surface. After 3 engagements, the reflection was so cloudy, the mirror became useless. Glass remained the best option. Clear, accurate, reliable, but fragile. Carson asked Kowalski, "How long before every mirror in this division cracks?" Kowalski looked at his taped-together mirror, looked at the distorted reflection. He said, "Maybe a week, maybe less if we keep fighting." "Then what?" "Then we're back where we started, blind in the dead zone." Abrams knew this too. He sent a message to division headquarters requesting proper equipment, adjustable periscopes, angled sights, anything engineered for close-range combat. The response came back within hours. "No modifications available. Use field-expedient solutions." Translation: you're on your own. But field-expedient solutions were breaking, literally, and the Germans were learning. They noticed American Shermans fighting differently, engaging at closer ranges, hitting weak points with unusual accuracy. German tank commanders started changing tactics. They stopped advancing into close range, started engaging from 600, 700, 800 yards, ranges where the mirror technique didn't matter, ranges where Panthers had every advantage. On September 19th, 4th Armored lost 8 Shermans, not because the mirror technique failed, because the Germans never let them get close enough to use it. The innovation that saved Kowalski's life was becoming obsolete. 3 days after he discovered it, 3 days after it spread through the division, the window was closing, and Kowalski was about to realize something worse, something nobody had considered. The mirrors weren't just fragile, they were visible. German gunners could see loaders holding mirrors above periscopes, could see the glint of reflected sunlight, could identify which Shermans were using the new technique, and they started targeting those Shermans first. At 10:15 a.m. on September 20th, Private Ray Hollis sat in his Sherman 3 miles east of Arracourt. He'd practiced the mirror technique for 2 days straight, felt confident, ready. A Panther appeared at 350 yards, moving slowly through an orchard. Hollis positioned his mirror, angled it correctly, watched the reflection show the Panther's lower hull. The Panther fired first, not at the Sherman's center mass, at the turret. Specifically, at the periscope where Hollis held the mirror. The shell hit 6 inches above the periscope. The turret roof peeled open. Shrapnel filled the interior. Hollis died instantly. So did his commander. The driver managed to bail out. Barely. 2 hours later, it happened again. Another Sherman. Another loader holding a mirror. Another German shell aimed precisely at the periscope. This crew was luckier. The shell missed by 2 feet, but the message was clear. The Germans were targeting the mirrors. By afternoon, 4th Armored realized what was happening. German tank commanders were using binoculars to scan American formations, looking for telltale signs. A loader's hand above the periscope, a glint of reflected sunlight, anything that indicated mirror use. When they spotted it, they aimed high, went for the turret, not the hull, tried to kill the loader before he could aim. It was working. Abrams called another meeting. Every tank commander attended. The mood was different from 3 days ago. Then they'd been excited, optimistic. The mirror technique had given them an edge. Now that edge was dulling, fast. Abrams said, "The Germans know. They're watching for mirrors. They're shooting loaders." One commander asked, "Do we stop using them? And go back to being blind under 400 yards? No, we adapt." But adaptation wasn't simple. The mirror had to be visible to work. You had to hold it in a position where it caught light, reflected the battlefield, showed the gun sight what it needed to see. Any position that accomplished this also made the mirror visible to enemy observers. Some crews tried concealing the mirror until the last second. Keep it hidden. Wait until the enemy was close. Then raise it, aim, fire. Fast. This worked once, maybe twice, but combat wasn't that clean. Targets moved, ranges changed. You needed time to adjust the mirror angle, find the reflection, line up the shot. Rushing it meant missing, and missing meant dying. Other crews tried painting their mirrors flat black, reducing the glint. This helped slightly. But black paint also reduced reflection quality. The image appeared dimmer, harder to see, especially in low light or through smoke. You traded visibility to the enemy for visibility of the enemy. Not a good trade. Staff Sergeant Mike DiMaggio, the gunner who'd tried the dentist mirror back in August, proposed a different solution. He suggested mounting mirrors inside the turret permanently. Fixed position, fixed angle, calibrated for a specific range, maybe 350 yards. No hand-holding, no visible movement. Just a permanent optical modification that enemy observers couldn't spot. Abrams liked the idea. He ordered battalion maintenance crews to experiment. They took 5 Shermans out of rotation, mounted mirrors at various angles inside the turrets, tested them at different ranges. The results were mixed. Fixed mirrors worked perfectly at their calibrated range. At 350 yards, they were accurate within 6 inches. But at 300 yards, they aimed too high. At 400 yards, too low. The fixed angle couldn't adapt. Combat ranges weren't predictable. One engagement might happen at 200 yards, the next at 500. A fixed mirror only worked for one specific distance. Handheld mirrors remained more versatile, adjustable, capable of handling any range in the dead zone. But they were visible, targetable, deadly for the loader holding them. 4th Armored was stuck. Use handheld mirrors and risk getting shot. Use fixed mirrors and sacrifice versatility. Or abandon mirrors entirely and go back to fighting blind. Carson asked Kowalski, "What do you think?" Kowalski looked at his mirror. Still cracked, still taped, still working, barely. He said, "I think we need something better than this. Something designed for tanks, not bathrooms. We're not getting that, not from ordnance, not anytime soon. Then we keep using what we have, even if it gets you killed." Kowalski didn't answer immediately. He thought about Hollis, thought about the shell that hit his turret, thought about how it could have been bad news instead, could have been him. He said, "The Germans are killing us anyway. At least with the mirror, I can fight back." That night, Abrams made a decision. 4th Armored would continue using mirrors, handheld, adjustable, visible, but with new protocols. Loaders would only raise mirrors when absolutely necessary, when engagement was imminent, when there was no other option. The rest of the time, stay low, stay hidden. Don't give German gunners an easy target. It was a compromise, not a solution, but it kept the technique alive. For 3 more days, 4th Armored fought using mirror-assisted gunnery. They destroyed 41 German tanks, lost 19 of their own. Better than the old ratio. Not as good as those first engagements when the technique was new, when the Germans didn't know what to look for. By September 23rd, the Battle of Arracourt was winding down. 5th Panzer Army withdrew. Too many losses. Too much resistance. Patton's advance continued east. 4th Armored Division pushed toward the German border. The dead zone problem persisted, but it was manageable now. Crews knew the mirror technique, knew its limitations, knew when to use it and when to rely on other tactics. Kowalski survived. So did bad news. They fought through France, into Germany, all the way to Czechoslovakia. Kowalski kept his cracked mirror the entire time, taped and retaped, scratched and cloudy, but functional. It saved his life 4 more times before the war ended. But the mirror technique never became standard doctrine, never got mentioned in training manuals, never received official recognition from Ordnance Department. It remained a field expedient solution, improvised, temporary, forgotten by everyone except the men who used it. Until 50 years later, when a historian found Lieutenant Carson's after-action report buried in the National Archives. Carson's report sat in a filing cabinet at 3rd Army headquarters for 6 months. Nobody read it. Not unusual. Thousands of after-action reports flooded in daily during the final months of the war. Battles, engagements, skirmishes. Each one documented, each one filed. Most never analyzed. In March 1945, a young captain named Robert Hayes was assigned to compile lessons learned from armored combat in Europe. He read through hundreds of reports, looking for patterns, looking for innovations, looking for anything that might improve doctrine for future conflicts. He found Carson's report on page 417 of a stack that reached his shoulder. The report described the mirror technique in detail, included diagrams, included testimonials from 12 tank commanders, included statistics. 4th Armored Division destroyed 87 German tanks using mirror-assisted gunnery between September 17th and October 3rd, 1944. Lost 31 Shermans during the same period. A kill ratio of nearly 3-to-1, better than any other American armored division in France during that time frame. Hayes forwarded the report to Ordnance Department with a recommendation. Investigate the technique. Develop purpose-built optical equipment. Issue it to all armored divisions. Standard equipment. Not field expedient, not improvised. Engineered. Ordnance Department's response came back in April 1945. Interesting, but impractical. Close-range tank combat is becoming obsolete. Future doctrine emphasizes long-range gunnery and air support. No development recommended. The war in Europe ended 3 weeks later. The report went back into the filing cabinet. Hayes moved on to other projects. The mirror technique died with the war, but a few tankers remembered. Kowalski remembered. He kept his cracked mirror after mustering out in November 1945, brought it home to Pittsburgh, put it in a shoebox in his basement. Didn't talk about it much. Didn't think anyone would care. He was right. Nobody cared. Not in 1945. Not in 1950. Not even during the Korean War, when American tanks fought in close terrain again, in villages and rice paddies where long-range gunnery didn't matter. The M26 Pershing and M46 Patton had better sights than the Sherman, better optics, better depression angles. The dead zone problem was reduced, though not eliminated. Nobody thought about mirrors. In 1973, a military historian named Dr. James Whitmore started researching small unit innovations during World War II. Not the big stuff, not radar or the atomic bomb, the little things, the field modifications, the improvised solutions that soldiers created when official equipment failed them. He found Carson's report by accident while researching something else entirely. Read it 3 times. Couldn't believe it. American tank crews had solved a critical gunnery problem with bathroom mirrors, and nobody documented it beyond one lieutenant's after-action report. Whitmore tracked down surviving members of 4th Armored Division, found 12 men who'd used the technique. 8 agreed to interviews. Kowalski was one of them. By then he was 51 years old, worked as a machinist, had 3 kids, rarely talked about the war. Whitmore asked him, "Why didn't this become standard doctrine?" Kowalski said, "Because it was stupid. A hand mirror. Who's going to put that in a manual?" But it worked. It worked because we were desperate, because we didn't have anything better. You think the Army wants to admit their equipment was so bad that soldiers needed bathroom mirrors to fight? Whitmore published his findings in a military history journal in 1976. Small circulation, maybe 3,000 readers. The article mentioned the mirror technique in 2 paragraphs. Noted it as an interesting footnote. Nothing more. The article didn't change anything. Tank doctrine continued evolving. Better optics, better fire control systems, computer-assisted targeting. By the 1980s, the M1 Abrams could engage targets accurately at any range, any angle. The dead zone didn't exist anymore, not for American tanks. But the principle remained relevant. Improvisation, adaptation, solving critical problems with available materials when official solutions don't exist or arrive too late. That lesson mattered. That lesson still matters. In 1994, Kowalski died. Heart attack, age 72. His son found the shoebox in the basement while cleaning out the house. Opened it, found the mirror. Cracked down the middle, held together with yellowed adhesive tape. He didn't know what it was, didn't know its history. Threw it away. The mirror that killed 3 Panzers in 4 minutes ended up in a Pittsburgh landfill. But the story survived. Whitmore's article got referenced in other books, other articles, other documentaries. Not often, not prominently, but enough that the mirror technique didn't disappear entirely from history. In 2008, a military blogger found Carson's original report digitized in the National Archives online database, posted it. The story went viral, sort of, within military history circles at least. People were fascinated, not by the technical details, by the desperation, by the innovation, by the fact that American soldiers defeated superior German armor with something as mundane as a bathroom mirror. The blogger's post included a question at the end, a question nobody had really asked before, a question that changed how people understood the Battle of Arracourt. The question was simple. How many other innovations like this existed? How many other field-expedient solutions saved lives but never made it into the official record? And the answer, discovered through years of subsequent research, was shocking. The answer was hundreds, maybe thousands. Field-expedient innovations that worked, saved lives, never got documented, never became official doctrine. Lost to history because nobody wrote them down. Or because the reports got filed and forgotten. Or because the soldiers who invented them died before anyone asked. Researchers found evidence of other optical modifications. Tank crews in Italy used shaving cream on periscopes to reduce glare. Crews in France mounted multiple mirrors at different angles, creating crude rangefinders. One crew in Belgium allegedly used a lady's compact mirror with a built-in light, though this remained unconfirmed. But mirrors weren't the only innovation. Tankers welded spare track links to hull fronts for extra armor. Infantry squads created improvised suppressors from oil cans and steel wool. Medics developed new tourniquets from parachute cord and tent stakes. Engineers built bridge supports from salvaged railroad ties. None of it was in the manuals. All of it worked. The military studied this phenomenon after the 2008 blog post went viral. They wanted to understand why so many field innovations never reached official channels. The conclusion was bureaucratic. The approval process for new equipment took months, sometimes years. Testing, evaluation, production, distribution. By the time something got approved, the war had moved on. The tactical situation had changed. The innovation was obsolete. Field-expedient solutions were immediate. Soldiers identified problems, solved them with available materials, implemented solutions within hours. No testing, no approval, no bureaucracy. Just survival. The military learned from this. Modern doctrine now includes rapid fielding procedures, fast-track approval for soldier-identified innovations, programs that encourage improvisation, forums where troops can share field modifications. The mirror technique, in a way, changed how the Army thinks about innovation. 60 years too late to help Kowalski, but not too late to help future soldiers. In 2012, a documentary filmmaker named Sarah Chen decided to tell the mirror story properly. Full production, interviews with surviving tankers, archival footage, CGI recreations. She tracked down Kowalski's son, showed him his father's service record, told him what the mirror meant. Kowalski's son donated his father's medals to the Patton Museum. Not the mirror, that was gone, but the medals remained. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Presidential Unit Citation for 4th Armored Division's actions at Arracourt. The citation mentioned innovative gunnery techniques, but didn't specify what those techniques were. Now people know. Chen's documentary aired on the History Channel in 2013. 3 million viewers. The story resonated, not because of the technical details, because of what it represented. Ordinary soldiers facing impossible odds, using whatever they had, surviving through improvisation and courage. Eddie Kowalski never considered himself a hero, never thought his mirror trick mattered much. He told Whitmore in that 1973 interview, "I was scared. I picked up the first thing I saw. It worked. That's all." But it wasn't all. It was innovation under fire. It was problem solving when death was seconds away. It was the difference between 29 American tankers going home and 29 American tankers dying in French fields. Kowalski went home. He married his high school sweetheart in 1946, had 3 kids, worked 41 years at the same machine shop, coached Little League, volunteered at the VFW, lived a quiet life, never sought attention, never claimed credit for anything beyond doing his job. He told his son once, near the end, the mirror was Hayes's mirror. He died holding it. I just picked it up. He's the one who should be remembered. But Hayes is remembered as a name in a casualty report. Kowalski is remembered as the man who changed how American tanks fought. Not because he wanted recognition, because his innovation saved lives, because someone finally wrote it down, because the story mattered. The Battle of Arracourt ended in late September 1944. 5th Panzer Army lost 281 tanks. 4th Armored Division lost 48. The single best kill ratio of any American armored engagement in World War II. Historians credit superior tactics, better positioning, American air support, but the men who were there credit something else. They credit improvisation. They credit desperation. They credit a 22-year-old loader who picked up a broken mirror and refused to die. The dead zone still exists in modern tank design. Different optics, different technology. But the fundamental geometry problem persists. Crews train for it now, practice close-range engagement, use purpose-built equipment. But none of that equipment is a 5-inch hand mirror held at 45 degrees. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones nobody expects. Sometimes survival comes down to seconds, desperation, and a piece of broken glass. Sometimes the difference between life and death is noticing something everyone else ignored. Eddie Kowalski noticed, and 87 German tanks paid the price. That cracked mirror saved more than his life. It saved his crew, his battalion, maybe his entire division. Not because it was sophisticated, because it worked. Because when official solutions failed, soldiers found their own answers. They always have. They always will. The mirror is gone, lost to a landfill. But the lesson remains. Innovation doesn't come from laboratories or engineering departments. It comes from the front lines, from soldiers who refuse to accept that a problem is unsolvable, from men like Eddie Kowalski, who picked up a piece of broken glass and changed history. 4 minutes, 3 panzers, 1 mirror. Sometimes, that's all it takes. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Our community spans from Texas to Tasmania, from veterans to history enthusiasts. You're part of something special here. Thank you for watching. And thank you for keeping these stories alive.